Imagine you walk into a room and instantly feel this just crushing weight pressing against your chest, even though literally no one has spoken a single word.
Right. Yeah. We've all felt that.
Or, I mean, on the flip side, you sit down next to a total stranger on a park bench, and within seconds, your breathing slows.
Yeah.
You just feel this profound, inexplicable sense of safety.
And for centuries, we've just written this off as intuition or a gut feeling, just a vibe.
Exactly.
Sure.
But what if I told you that biophysicists have actually discovered your connective tissue is literally acting as an antenna?
Oh, it gets even wilder than that.
Right. Because the texts also say that the water inside your cells is functioning as this bioelectric semiconductor, emitting microscopic particles of light to, like, audit the room you just walked into.
It completely shatters our conventional understanding of where the self ends and the environment begins. I mean, we like to think of the human body as a closed system.
A sealed container.
Right, but the reality is that we are porous, luminous, and constantly engaged in this invisible exchange of biological data.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we have a highly specific, paradigm-shifting mission. We are conducting a complete, rigorous, and meticulous exploration into a framework known as the Echoes of the Prism of Odysseys.
Yeah, and we are zooming in exclusively on one of its most fascinating concepts, which is the informal economy and ecology of the Biogiciel.
Okay, let's pause right there. To give you, the listener, a quick anchor, Biogiciel is a term that fuses biology and software, so BioWare.
Basically, it refers to the operating system of your physical, emotional, and neurological self.
Right. And to understand this operating system, we are pulling from a massive interconnected library of sources. We've got complex systems ecology, granular biophysics, interpersonal neurophysiology.
And the deeply profound sociological essays of Alan Imbert.
Yes, Ember. He maps out how our modern society, so our food, our schools, our social media, is actively hacking this biological software.
But the central thesis that ties all of this together is a radical reframing of how we interact. The texts argue that long before humans ever traded a coin or a shell or, signed a contract, we were engaged in a much older, much more fundamental economy.
An economy of signals.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this because this is the foundational axiom of the whole framework. The exchange of signals precedes the exchange of goods.
Yes.
When you and I hear the word economy, we immediately think of bank accounts, GDP, stock markets, transactional capitalism, basically.
Yeah.
But the Prism of Odysseys says we have to look deeper.
Much deeper. If we turn to established anthropology specifically, there's the foundational work of Marcel Mauss in his 1925 Essay on the Gift, or Karl Polanyi's 1944 The Great Transformation.
These are heavy hitters in anthropology.
Right, and they provide concrete proof that market economies, as we know them today, are historically recent anomalies. For the vast majority of human history, the foundational structure of human interaction was the gift economy.
Let's linger on that for a second because I think people misunderstand the phrase gift economy. They think it's just ancient people being nice and handing each other baskets of fruit for free.
Yeah, they picture this sort of utopian drum circle.
Exactly, but it wasn't just haphazard charity, was it?
Not at all. The informal economy of the gift had incredibly strict, though unwritten, laws of value, scarcity or rareté, and symbolic debt.
So like the transmission of knowledge from an elder to a youth.
Yes. The performance of a healing ritual, the sharing of a foundational myth around a fire, these are exchanges of what the Prism calls root resonances, or resonances souche.
Okay, wow. So these exchanges literally built the social and biological fabric of the community.
Precisely. So an elder telling a story wasn't just entertainment, it was a transfer of biological and social regulation. And this older, informal economy never actually went away.
The modern transactional market just sort of grew over it and obscured it.
Right. But your biological software is still fundamentally programmed to run on this informal economy.
Which explains so much about modern burnout. This is why today people are so utterly exhausted by the purely transactional nature of the modern world.
Yes. You see this desperate societal craving to return to informal economies through mutual aid networks, sharing circles, and intentional communities.
Because we are literally starving for a currency that our nervous systems actually recognize. And, this ties perfectly into the ecology aspect of the source texts.
How so?
Well, if we look at complex systems ecology, like the work of Odum in the 1950s, or Holling's theories on ecosystem resilience in the 70s, we learned that biological systems in a network have emergent properties.
Oh, absolutely. The tipping points.
Right. You cannot reduce a forest just to a collection of individual trees. The fungal networks, the soil chemistry, the canopy cover, they create an emergent reality that dictates the health of every single leaf.
And the texts argue the exact same thing applies to human beings. Our biogiciels form a highly sensitive and visible frequency ecosystem.
The collective health dictates the individual health.
Hmm.
I mean, you cannot be a perfectly healthy, regulated cell if you are operating inside a deeply sick, dysregulated body.
It's impossible. So there is an economy of exchange signals that your accountant can't see, but your nervous system is literally auditing every single millisecond.
Which begs the question, how does that audit actually happen? Like, what is the mechanism of this transaction?
Yeah, the sources give us a very specific step-by-step engine for this. They call it the spec cycle. That's SPEC.
SPEC. Selection, projection, expectative, and collection.
That's the one. This is the biological algorithm of how you interact with the unseen world. Let's break it down, starting with phase one, which is selection.
And this isn't what people think it is, right?
No, not at all. Selection is perhaps the most crucial to understand because it is entirely counterintuitive to how we think we operate. We assume that we walk into a room and rationally choose what to pay attention to.
Like, I'm going to look at that painting.
Right. But selection is not a conscious, rational choice. It is an intentional, frequency-based filter.
I love the analogy of a radio dial for this. So, think about sitting in your car. There are dozens of radio stations broadcasting music right through your body at this very second.
Country, jazz, classical, heavy metal.
Right, but you only hear the one your dial is tuned to. The others are completely invisible.
And that is exactly how your biogiciel operates.
Yeah.
It automatically selects the resonances it is going to approach based on its current internal geometry.
Wait, so what you systematically notice in the world is just a partial reflection of what you currently are?
Yes. If your internal receiver is tuned to a frequency of fear, anxiety, or scarcity, you literally lack the bandwidth to process the signals of opportunity, calm, or safety that are passing right through you.
They are attenuated.
Exactly. They're filtered out by your own nervous system.
This explains so much. It explains why two people can walk down the exact same street and one person only notices the litter, the angry drivers, the decay.
While the other person notices the incredible architecture, the way the light hits the trees, the couple laughing on the corner.
Right. They're occupying the same physical space, but entirely different frequency economies.
And we see this in highly trained individuals, too. A master musician will hear subtle harmonic undertones in a noisy restaurant that an untrained ear literally cannot perceive.
Or a trained dancer will look at a crowd and instantly see the physical geometries, the hidden tensions, the postures.
Yeah, every new discipline you learn alters your spectrum of selection.
So the marker of this framework is this. If you want to read someone's bio-DL, you don't listen to what they say they believe. You watch their selection. You watch what they systematically notice and focus on.
It's the ultimate tell.
Okay, so my dial is tuned, and I have selected a signal. What happens next? Phase 2 is projection, right?
Projection is where we realize that observation is never passive. Before you even make physical contact, before you even open your mouth to say hello, you are projecting your internal state into the field.
Your intentions, your fears, your expectations.
Exactly.
Slow down. I need to make sure I grasp this, and I want you listening to really picture this. Are you saying that before I speak, I am objectively altering the physical space I am stepping into?
Yes. You are modifying what the texts call the transmission terrain. There is a field effect before contact.
How does that work biophysically?
Well, think of interpersonal neurobiology. We emit electromagnetic fields, acoustic microtremors in our breath, pheromones. Your internal state literally alters the environment the other person is stepping into.
Ah, this is that vibe. When someone walks in and the tension spikes so hard you could cut it with a knife.
Or when a specific friend walks in and without a single word, a wave of calm washes over the group. That is projection at work.
Incredible. And that leads into the final two phases, which happen in rapid succession, I believe. Phase 3 is expectative.
Right, the liminal waiting space, the physical and psychological anticipation of the resonance taking hold. It's that microsecond of suspension when you offer a smile and wait to see if it is returned.
And phase 4 is collection.
Collection is the final integration of that resonance into your frequency memory. The cycle is complete, and it forms a closed loop.
So the quality of your selection determined your projection, which shaped your expectation, which dictated what you ultimately collected.
And here is the kicker: what you just collected now updates your radio dial for the very next selection.
It's a continuous, self-reinforcing loop, a physiological economy of signal exchange.
Precisely.
Now, I have to step in here and play the skeptic. Because as elegant as the spec cycle sounds, it can easily sound like purely metaphorical poetry. It's easy to say we exchange intentions and vibes,
Sure.
but this deep dive promised rigorous biophysics. If we are constantly exchanging these signals, where's the physical hardware? How does a bag of water, bone, and tissue, the human body, process an invisible, informal economy?
And that is the essential pivot we have to make. To understand the hardware, we transition from anthropology into hard biophysics.
Okay, let's get into the weeds.
The source material draws on the empirical observations of Alan Imbert, who formulated a theory of charge, recharge, and discharge based on extreme sociological and physical marginality.
Right, he observed that as he moved through the world, human presences weren't neutral.
No, not at all. Some people provided immense neurological soothing. They regulated his emotions, expanded his cognitive bandwidth, made him feel physically lighter, or recharge.
But other presences induced deep fatigue, dissociation, and emotional saturation. A massive, draining discharge.
And Imbert didn't leave this as a subjective metaphor. He connected it to established physiological science. The human brain, as we mentioned earlier, is not a closed container.
We have decades of research on this, right?
Yeah, showing that the human heart generates an electromagnetic field that extends centimeters, sometimes feet, from the body. We know that when two people are in deep rapport, their neural oscillations physically couple.
So emotional contagion is not a psychological illusion. It is biologically real, measurable, and completely unavoidable.
So when you are being drained by a toxic boss or an anxious relative, you aren't just annoyed. You are literally engaging in a biophysical exchange where your nervous system is burning metabolic energy to maintain homeostasis against a disruptive, chaotic signal.
Wow. And the sources provide the exact mathematical and neuroendocrine models for how this works inside your body, don't they?
They do. Let's look at the stress response. When we receive positive, coherent signals, a calming presence, a harmonic sound, a gentle touch, it activates a specific region in the brainstem called the nucleus of the solitary tract, or the NTS.
Okay, and what does the NTS do?
It acts as the gateway to your vagus nerve. It immediately spikes your parasympathetic vagal tone. You can think of the vagus nerve as the primary brake pedal for your entire nervous system.
Okay, let's ground this for the listener. Think about the last time you were stuck in gridlock traffic. You're gripping the steering wheel, your jaw is clenched, your heart is pounding, your body is flooded with cortisol.
You are in a state of high stress.
Right. Now imagine you turn on a piece of music that you deeply love, a harmonic regulating frequency. What actually happens in your blood at that moment?
When you hit that vagal brake pedal with the music, it sends an inhibitory signal that cascades down your endocrine system. It stops the release of CRH in the hypothalamus.
Which stops ACTH in the pituitary.
Exactly, which ultimately shuts off the cortisol faucet in your adrenal glands. But the texts go further. They give us the exact mathematical mechanism for how that cortisol leaves your blood.
The text actually provides an algebraic equation for this.
Yeah.
It's C of T equals C0 minus CE times e to the negative K to CE times T plus CE.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to make our listeners do calculus by ear.
Yeah.
How do we visualize this math? What is the shape of this equation?
Think of this equation as a curve plotting how fast the stress vanishes from your body. Imagine a graph where the line suddenly drops off a steep cliff. That drop is your stress leaving.
Okay.
The variables are simple. C of T is your current stress. C0 is how flooded your system was at the peak of the traffic jam. CD is your healthy resting baseline.
But the magic is in the exponent, right? That KCL variable.
Exactly. KCL is your metabolic clearance rate. And here is the profound biophysical truth. That clearance rate is directly proportional to your vagal tone.
Wait, let me make sure I'm translating this correctly. If you encounter a truly regulating, coherent signal in your environment like that music, or a deeply safe person giving you a hug, it increases your vagal tone.
Yes.
And that vagal tone acts as a mathematical multiplier on the clearance rate.
Yes.
So you are exponentially accelerating the chemical breakdown of stress hormones in your blood simply by receiving an invisible signal from your environment.
You've got it. The informal economy has a physical currency and is measured in the exponential decay rate of toxic chemistry in your blood.
That is mind-blowing. But I want to push us even further because hormones are chemical messengers, and it makes sense that a nervous system signal changes our chemistry. But the sources claim something much more radical. They claim that these vibrations, these frequencies, actually change the physical structural tissues of our body. How on earth does a vibe change a physical muscle?
This is where we cross into the physics of granular media, specifically looking at the body's fascia.
Fascia, that's the connective tissue, right?
Yeah, it's the dense three-dimensional network of connective tissue that wraps around every single muscle, organ, and bone in your body. For a long time, anatomy just treated it as biological packing tape.
Just inert stuff holding us together.
Right, but the biophysics reports in our sources model the fascia differently. They model it as a dense granular medium suspended in fluid.
Okay, I need an analogy here. What does a dense granular medium look like in the real world?
Have you ever walked on the beach right at the water's edge where the sand is wet?
Yes, of course.
When you step on that wet sand, it feels hard. It locks up beneath your weight. It feels almost like concrete. But if you stand there and rapidly tap your foot, or if a wave sends a vibration through the ground, what happens?
The sand suddenly liquefies. It gets mushy, and your foot sinks right into it.
Exactly. In physics, that sudden shift from a hard, locked state to a fluid state is called a phase transition. And the flow behavior, the rheology of this wet sand, is governed by a specific physical law.
And the texts mention the key variable in this law is I, the inertial number.
Right. Okay, stick with us here because this applies directly to your body.
Listener, pay attention to this.
When your fascia is holding on to chronic tension, trauma, or the stress of a chaotic environment, it gets locked into a rigid state. It acts exactly like that hard, unyielding wet sand. Your tissue is literally jammed.
It's locked up.
But when your body is subjected to the right frequencies, whether that's a harmonic sound wave, specific wavelengths of light, or therapeutic human touch, it induces micro-oscillations in the tissue.
It's the tapping of the foot on the wet sand.
Yes. Those vibrations force that inertial number, that I variable, to drop towards zero. And when I approach a zero, physicists say the material undergoes an unjamming transition. The connective tissue in your body suddenly transitions from a rigid, glass-like state holding all your historical tension into a fluid, relaxed, sliding state. The mechanical stress in your myofascial network literally melts.
So a sound wave, or the specific resonant frequency of someone speaking to you in a calm, safe voice, acts as a mechanical key. It physically unlocks the granular structure of your connective tissue.
It does.
We aren't just exchanging ideas when we talk. We are physically vibrating each other's anatomy into different states of matter.
It is profound. And if you think that's deep, the sources take us one level deeper, down to the molecular level, down to the actual water inside our cells.
Right, the easy water and the biophotons. Now, when I read this part of the source material, I had to read it 3 times. Explain easy water to me, because apparently the water inside our bodies isn't the same as the water in a glass.
It's not. The water in a glass is bulk water. The molecules are jumbled and moving randomly. But inside your cells, water is packed tightly against the hydrophilic or water-loving surfaces of your proteins and fascia.
And it changes.
When water touches these biological surfaces, it structures itself. It forms a highly ordered liquid crystalline phase. This is called exclusion zone water, or easy water.
And its chemical formula changes, right? It's not H2O.
Correct. The structured layers actually become H3O2-. In the process of structuring, the water kicks out positively charged protons. So you end up with a negatively charged zone of structured water right next to a zone of positively charged protons.
Wait, a negative charge separated from a positive charge? That's literally a battery.
That is exactly what it is. The easy water in your cells acts as a bioelectric semiconductor and a biological battery.
Incredible.
And here is where it ties directly into the economy of signals. When we are deeply relaxed, when our tissues undergo that unjamming transition we just talked about, this easy water layer expands. Our internal batteries charge up.
And there's a byproduct of this, right?
Yes. As a byproduct of this highly efficient cellular energy production, our cells undergo a process called ultra-weak photon emission, or UPE.
You're saying our mitochondria emit light, actual physical light.
We literally emit biophotons. We glow. It is too faint for the naked eye to see, but highly sensitive photomultipliers can capture it.
That is wild.
Now, when a person is in a state of oxidative stress or surrounded by a toxic, draining environment, that light emission is chaotic, erratic, and disordered. But when the biogiciel receives harmonic signals when it feels safe, the spectrum of this emitted light stabilizes. It becomes coherent, shifting into the visible and near-infrared spectrum.
This is unbelievable. When we use the phrase, wow, she has such a glow about her, or he was radiating peace, we think we're just being poetic.
But the biophysics says we are literally describing reality. We are luminous beings, emitting and absorbing stable or chaotic light signals in this invisible economy.
We are constantly transmitting the state of our biological software through electromagnetic fields, acoustic resonance in our fascia, and the coherent light of our cells. Okay, take a breath, because we are incredibly deep into the scientific weeds here. Let's pivot to part 3. Because here is the wild thing about all of this hard science. Humanity has known about these biophysical realities for thousands of years.
We just didn't use the vocabulary of rheology, granular dynamics, or ultra-weak photon emission. We use the vocabulary of tradition, ritual, and ancient medicine.
Right, and the sources make this brilliant effort to translate these ancient traditional concepts into our modern biophysical framework. It's a globalization of cultural knowledge.
Yeah.
For example, let's take the concept of Pi, or Qi, from traditional Asian medicine. It's usually translated as a vague, mystical life force or energy. But how do the biophysics reports map Qi?
The reports map Qi directly to the dynamics of ionic depolarization currents and the microcirculatory fluid flow in that easy water we just discussed. It is the literal, measurable bioelectric flow in the body.
And what about Qi? Ancient traditions called it the internal breath or the subtle information of the body.
Qi maps perfectly to the geometry of acoustic standing waves inside the body's cavities. When you hum or chant, you are generating Qi.
And Tai? That's considered the supreme physical expression in many martial arts.
Tai is translated as the global somatic resonance, the mechanical, unjammed alignment of those fascial chains.
So by translating these terms, we realize that ancient practitioners weren't performing magic.
Yeah.
They were manipulating the exact same biological hardware. The EZ water, the granular fascia, the vagal nerve that modern physicists are studying today.
Exactly. And the texts give us some incredible specific examples of this. Let's talk about mudras.
Oh, this part was fascinating. In yoga and meditation, mudras are specific hand gestures. You might press the tip of your index finger to the tip of your thumb while keeping the other finger straight.
And to a modern, skeptical observer, this just looks like a symbolic pose, a cultural performance.
Right. It looks like you're just signaling to the room, I am meditating now. But the biophysics report on mudras shatters that assumption completely.
It really does. When you hold a mudra, that light, prolonged digital contact between your fingers stimulates a very specific set of low-threshold mechanoreceptors in your skin called C-tactile afferents.
The CT fibers.
Yes. These are unmyelinated nerve fibers that don't just register pressure, they register effective touch. They project directly into the insular cortex of your brain and activate your hypothalamus to synthesize oxytocin.
So just by lightly pressing your fingers together in a specific geometry, you are triggering a systemic release of oxytocin, a bonding hormone.
Which then cascades down to modulate the sodium-potassium pumps in your cells, restoring their resting potential.
But there's also a thermal and fluid dynamic element to the mudra, right?
Yes, that skin-to-skin contact generates microheat, just a tiny localized increase of 0.5 to 1.2 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
According to the Darcy-Brinkman equation, which models fluid dynamics in porous media, that tiny temperature gradient is enough to create microconvection currents in the interstitial fluids of your hands.
Let me visualize that. It's like putting a tiny heater at the bottom of a fish tank. The heat causes the water to circulate and flow.
Exactly. The microheat from your fingers causes the fluid inside your hand's fascia to circulate, which literally accelerates the clearing of local microtensions and metabolic waste.
So the mudra isn't a symbol at all. It is a highly engineered biomechanical switch designed to regulate the biogiciel.
And the sources apply this exact same logic to Reiki, the practice of therapeutic touch.
How does that work biophysically?
With Reiki, the practitioner's hands are used to induce that exact same jamming transition, forcing the inertial number toward zero in the recipient's fascia.
The wet sand analogy again.
Right. The stillness, the heat, and the light touch drop the inertial number, unjamming the tissue. And what the sociological essays emphasize here is how incredibly inclusive this practice is.
This is a vital point for the listener. Reiki, or therapeutic touch, requires no expensive medical equipment. It requires no heavy cognitive participation or verbal processing from the recipient.
It entirely bypasses language barriers.
Exactly. It acts as a profound ritual of bodily reaffiliation. For marginalized populations or people in oncology wards or palliative care, formal medicine can often feel deeply alienating and clinical.
It can. Offering a safe, nonverbal space of harmonic touch reintegrates that person into the human frequency ecosystem. It reduces their systemic pain using the exact same biophysical pathways, vagal tone, oxytocin, endorphins, but through the informal economy.
Is the informal economy providing profound care where the formal medical economy struggles to provide basic comfort?
Okay, I have one more example from the ancient world that blew my mind, Karasansui. Japanese Zen gardens.
Yes, the carefully raked gravel around specific asymmetrical rocks, again, to the uninitiated tourist, it's just pretty landscaping.
But the sources analyze it as a highly sophisticated neurophysiological tool.
They do. The raked gravel is acting as a visual optical metamaterial. The concentric lines in the sand simulate diffraction wave fronts. When you sit and contemplate it, the geometry physically stabilizes your saccadic eye movement. Saccadic movements. Those are the rapid, involuntary, microscopic jumps our eyes make constantly as they scan a room.
Oh, exactly. Your eyes are constantly darting around processing chaotic visual information. But the specific geometry of the Zen gardens stops that darting. It stabilizes the gaze.
And what happens in the brain when that stops?
When the eyes stop frantically searching, the brain's dorsal attentional network activates, and the brain shifts into producing alpha and theta brainwaves.
Alpha waves signal calm vigilance, and theta waves correlate with deep emotional integration and memory processing. And the biophysical result of staring at these rocks.
Salivary cortisol plummets. Studies show it can drop from a highly stressed state of over 25 nanomoles per liter down to a deeply regulated state of under 10 nanomoles per liter.
The garden is literally a machine built to lower your blood cortisol through optical geometry.
It's architectural medicine.
But, okay, I have to pause us here. I need to play devil's advocate because I promised the listener we would rigorously examine everything.
Sure, go ahead.
We have hard math for Zen gardens. We have fluid dynamics for hand gestures and granular physics for tissue vibrations.
Yeah.
But the sources also dive into some deeply, deeply speculative territory.
You're referring to the extensions.
Yes. The outline explicitly mentions Extension 22 on the CIA's 1983 Gateway process. And even more out there, Extension 24 on Le Petit Peuple's fairies, nature spirits.
I know, it sounds like quite a leap.
How on earth do we reconcile rigorous biophysics with the CIA trying to astral project and literal fairies?
I completely understand the skepticism. That is the exact friction the Prism of Odysseys wants you to explore. To reconcile this, we have to apply what the framework calls its epistemic grid.
Epistemic grid, a way of evaluating knowledge.
Exactly. Let's take the Gateway process first. In 1983, the CIA investigated the Monroe Institute's hemisync audio technology, exploring out-of-body experiences and altered states of consciousness. Now, the researchers involved, brilliant minds like physicist David Bohm and neuroscientist Carl Pribram, didn't necessarily prove that a soul physically leaves the body and travels to Moscow.
So what did they prove? Why is it in the source material?
They proved that science must take subjective, phenomenal experiences seriously, rather than arrogantly rejecting them, simply because we lack the current theoretical framework to measure them. The phenomenological experience of the operator, what they see, feel, and learn in that altered state, is real, valid data.
Okay, I can accept that for altered states. But how does this epistemic grid apply to Le Petit Peuple, fairies?
The canonical position of Extension 24 is not that Disney-style fairies with gossamer wings are hiding under mushrooms in your garden.
Thank goodness.
The position is that across centuries and across entirely disconnected cultures globally, there is a universal human convergence of perception.
Convergence of perception. What does that mean?
In specific natural places with incredibly dense, coherent information fields, ancient forests, deep valleys, people in states of maximum biological receptivity perceive something.
They are perceiving a frequency that our ordinary instruments miss.
Precisely. Remember the Biogiciel's filter? Selection.
Right.
If our scientific instruments are tuned only to specific, narrow electromagnetic frequencies, we miss the rest of the spectrum. The Prism stance is that this historical, universal human perception merits rigorous investigation.
It fundamentally rejects blind, uncritical belief, but it equally rejects arrogant, dismissive rejection.
It chooses the inquiry. It demands we humbly calibrate our integral probe to perceive layers of the signal that might currently be invisible to us.
It's about scientific humility, recognizing that our current X-ray machine doesn't see everything, But that doesn't mean the bones aren't there.
Beautifully put.
And this realization brings us to a critical, urgent pivot in our deep dive.
Yeah.
We've established that we are exquisite, luminous biological antennas tuned to an intricate frequency ecosystem.
Yeah.
So what happens when we take this delicate, glowing antenna and we drop it into the loud, polluted, hyper-transactional environment of a modern industrial city? Does the antenna just break?
It crashes. Or, more accurately, it mutates in ways that cause immense human suffering. The sociological essays in the source material map exactly how modern society systematically disrupts, drains, and corrupts the Biogiciel.
This brings us to the convergence of vulnerabilities. And listener, this is a heavy, heartbreaking, but absolutely vital concept.
It really is.
The essay points out that individuals suffering burnout, severe anxiety, marginalization doesn't just spontaneously generate from inside the individual.
Right.
The texts argue it emerges from a rigged system.
And the texts provide an equation for this predictable tragedy: neurodivergence plus early complex trauma, plus a dysfunctional family environment, plus inadequate schooling, plus economic precariousness.
All piling on top of each other.
Right. When those factors converge, the trajectory toward profound marginality and institutional violence is almost mathematically predictable.
But the most important note you made when we were prepping for this is that this trajectory is not a biological fatality.
Emphatically, no. According to Imbert, it is a systemic fatality. The system is intentionally designed in a way that ensures bodies with this specific convergence of traits will suffer. Let's trace how deep this systemic corruption goes, starting with the most basic, foundational input we give our bodies: food.
Right. The essay on nutrition, family, and education. It states that the modern food industry isn't just selling empty calories. It is executing a biological transformation of humanity for profit. We are talking about ultra-processed foods, referred to as AUTs in the text.
And these aren't just nutritional failures, they completely devastate the gut microbiome.
And we know now that the gut is intimately directly connected to the brain via the vagus nerve.
Exactly. Massive epidemiological studies link these highly inflammatory processed foods directly to massive spikes in clinical depression and anxiety. But the tragedy goes deeper when we look at it through the lens of DOAD.
DOHAD, the developmental origins of health and disease. This is the science of nutritional epigenetics. I need a good analogy for this because epigenetics can be incredibly dense.
Think of your DNA as a massive, grand library filled with thousands of blueprints for how to build and maintain a healthy human body. Every human has roughly the same library.
Okay.
But epigenetics are the librarians. They decide which doors in the library are open and which are padlocked shut.
I follow.
The nutritional environment that a fetus or a young child is exposed to literally instructs those librarians on which doors to lock for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
If a mother, trapped in poverty, is forced by food deserts and economic scarcity to consume highly inflammatory, ultra-processed foods, the epigenetic markers on her child's DNA are altered in utero.
The librarian puts a padlock on the door holding the blueprint for healthy metabolic function, or the door holding the blueprint for robust emotional regulation.
Exactly. The child is pre-programmed for metabolic and neurological vulnerability before they even take their first breath. The texts argue that the capitalist food industry is effectively generating biological inequality at the genetic level, ensuring that populations exposed to poverty suffer the deepest biological consequences.
That is chilling. And then that child, already carrying this epigenetic vulnerability, already carrying the locked doors, has to navigate the family structure. Poverty doesn't just mean a lack of money in the bank, right?
According to the research by behavioral economists Mullainathan and Shafir cited in the text, poverty creates a literal scarcity mindset.
What does that mean for the brain?
They call it the bandwidth tax. Living in chronic poverty forces the human brain into a cognitive tunnel. If you are constantly managing existential emergencies, how to pay rent, how to keep the electricity on, how to get food, that chronic stress consumes your cognitive and emotional bandwidth.
It drains the Biogiciel's resources.
Yes, leaving very little bandwidth for sensitive, emotionally attuned parenting. It is not a lack of love. It is a systemic draining of the biological capacity to co-regulate.
And then, as if that wasn't enough of a hurdle, this child enters the school system. And here, the sources bring in the brilliant French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu.
Bourdieu's work on social reproduction.
Right. The school system aggressively claims to be a meritocracy. Work hard, and you will succeed. But Bourdieu's framework suggests that schools actually just reward inherited cultural capital.
They reward the vocabulary, the quiet-seated behaviors, the references, and the habits of the dominant affluent class. So if a child enters the system lacking that specific cultural capital, perhaps carrying the markers of poverty, trauma, or neurodivergence, the system reads them as broken immediately.
Which triggers the Pygmalion effect, researched by Robert Rosenthal in 1968. This is where the whole system collapses in on the child. Explain the Pygmalion effect for us.
It is the psychological phenomenon where expectations literally become self-fulfilling prophecies. Imagine it like microphone feedback. A teacher subconsciously reads a marginalized or neurodivergent child as difficult or deficient based purely on their lack of cultural capital.
And because of this internal bias, the teacher's behavior changes.
Exactly. They offer less positive attention, they use a harsher tone, they have lower expectations.
They project a frequency of failure.
Yes. Remember the projection phase of the spec cycle? The teacher projects this and the child internalizes it. The child collects it.
And then their performance drops, they act out, which fulfills the teacher's initial assumption.
Causing the teacher to project even harsher signals.
The system screeches like microphone feedback, actively creating the failure it anticipated. It's devastating. And it proves how the informal economy of signal, the teacher's micro-expressions, the subtle tone of voice, the withdrawal of attention, can biologically and psychologically crush a developing biogiciel.
And as if that wasn't enough friction for a developing mind, we then introduce them to the ultimate mutational force of our era, social media.
The source text frames social media not just as a technology, but as an anthropological mutation on par with the Industrial Revolution.
It cites Shoshana Zuboff's concept of surveillance capitalism.
Right, this profoundly asymmetric exchange. You get a free app to look at pictures, and in return, you hand over your biometric and behavioral data to be analyzed, packaged, and sold to advertisers who use it to predict and manipulate your future behavior.
It is the ultimate hijacking of the Biogiciel's attention filter, and the physical toll is measurable. The text notes anatomical shifts like text neck, the degradation of the cervical spine from staring down at screens.
Not to mention the massive tragic spike in eating disorders driven by algorithmically amplified, hyper-filtered body ideals that completely dysregulate a young person's self-perception.
And then there's the societal toll, the infodemic. Fake news and algorithmic rage spreading like a virus because the machine is designed to reward outrage and engagement over truth.
It actively erodes our shared reality, keeping everyone in a constant state of cortisol-flooded stress.
However, we must pause and maintain absolute nuance here. The essay does not take a purely technophobic, reactionary stance. And neither should we.
Right, because it explicitly acknowledges that for marginalized groups, LGBTQ+ individuals, people living with rare disabilities, sprawling diasporas, these exact same platforms provide unprecedented, life-saving spaces.
They allow people to find solidarity, visibility, and community building that their immediate physical geography completely denied them.
So it's not inherently good or evil. It is simply a profound, chaotic acceleration of the frequency ecosystem.
It's an incredibly powerful tool that can either deeply regulate or deeply dysregulate the biogicial, depending on how the algorithms are tuned and how conscious the user is of their own selection and projection.
We are living through an accelerated anthropological mutation. Our family structures, our work environments, our information diets, they are transforming at a speed the human nervous system has never encountered in its evolutionary history.
The environment is moving way faster than the biology can adapt.
So, what do? We are caught in the microphone feedback loop. We are bombarded by ultra-processed food, systemic bias, surveillance capitalism, and a completely dysregulated frequency ecosystem. How do we survive this without being crushed?
This brings us to the climax of our deep dive, Part 5. Navigating the mutation, Tesla, resistance, and the new constellation.
To find a way forward, to find a way to survive the crushing weight of modern systems, the Prism of Odysseys looks to one of the greatest manipulators of invisible energy in human history, Nikola Tesla.
Specifically, the framework explores Tesla's law of three forces.
The active force, the passive force, and the neutralizing force. Let's really unpack this, because this is how the listener can actually use this entire framework in their daily life.
The conventional, instinctual human response to suffering, or to a hostile environment, is to try and eliminate the resistance. If something hurts, we try to destroy the thing causing the pain. If a system is broken, we try to smash it. But Tesla, when dealing with the immense, dangerous power of electricity, didn't seek to conquer or eliminate electrical resistance. He understood that resistance is a fundamental, unavoidable property of the physical universe.
Right. If you try to just push infinite current through a wire with no resistance, you just blow the circuit.
Exactly. So instead of fighting the resistance, Tesla looked for the conductor, the precise mechanism that would allow the active force, the electrical current, and the passive resistance of the medium to meet and produce something entirely new.
Light. He used the resistance to generate incandescence. I love this. It's like building a windmill.
How so?
If you live in a valley plagued by violent hurricane-force winds, you don't stand in a field and try to punch the wind to stop it. That's exhausting and impossible. You build a specific mechanism, the windmill, that uses the wind's immense resistance, its violence, to generate power.
That is a perfect analogy. The windmill is the neutralizing force. It harmonizes the active wind and the passive resistance of the ground. And this is exactly how the Prism of Odysseys asks us to approach human suffering, neurodivergence, and systemic failure.
The goal of this framework isn't to magically erase your suffering or to pretend that the world isn't often hostile, broken, and rigged.
Toxic positivity is not the goal here.
Not at all. The goal is to find the precise resonance, the internal conductor, where the force of your unique individual signal and the brutal resistance of reality can meet and produce something luminous.
Something that couldn't exist without both the force and the friction.
Let's give the listener a concrete scenario. Let's say you, listening right now, are stuck in a deeply toxic workplace. You have a micromanaging boss who is constantly projecting anxiety and demanding impossible standards.
The active force is your desire to do good work and maintain your sanity. The passive force, the resistance, is your boss's dysregulated biogiciel constantly flooding the room with stress.
And the conventional response is either to fight the boss, which usually gets you fired, or to absorb the stress until your cortisol decays your health and you completely burn out.
But using the prism, you look for the neutralizing force. You recognize that you cannot change their biogiciel, but you can manage your own selection and projection.
You build a structural windmill.
Exactly. You create radical, polite, emotional boundaries. You stop trying to seek their approval, which starves their chaotic feedback loop, and you communicate only in clear, documented frameworks.
You use the intense friction of that environment to forge an unshakable professional boundary within yourself.
You recalibrate your biogiciel to use that friction to perceive dynamics others can't. You take the trauma, the systemic friction, and instead of letting it crush your antenna, you use it to tune your antenna to a higher frequency of self-regulation.
Which brings us to the final, profound concept from the sources, the ontological act of reading.
Ontological meaning relating to the very nature of being, of existing.
The text states very clearly that the Prism of Odysseys, and by extension the entire library of complex concepts we've discussed over this deep dive, isn't just meant to be intellectually understood.
It isn't just data to memorize. It is meant to be traversed.
Engaging with these materials isn't just downloading a PDF into your brain. It is an active physical recalibration of your integral probe, your perceptual filter.
When you truly grasp the spec cycle, when you visualize your fascia unjamming like wet sand, when you understand the epigenetic weight of the systems around you, your biogeel is fundamentally updated.
You don't walk away from this material the same person.
No, you walk away with a newly configured constellation of realities.
You walk back into the exact same messy, loud, complicated world, but you are perceiving layers of the signal that you were completely blind to this morning. You can walk into a room, feel that heavy vibe, and instead of being overwhelmed and drained by it, you can name it.
You can track the projection. You can intentionally breathe to regulate your vagal tone. You can expand the easy water in your cells.
You become an active operator in the informal economy, rather than a passive victim of it.
You step out of the illusion that only visible monetary transactions matter, and you begin to master the invisible ledger.
And that is the perfect place to bring this deep dive to a close. What an absolute journey this has been. We started with the foundational idea of an invisible, informal economy of signals, moving step by step through the spec cycle of selection, projection, expectation, and collection.
We dove into the rigorous mathematical biophysics of how our bodies process these unseen signals, the exponential decay of cortisol driven by the vagus nerve, the unjamming transition of our granular fascia, and the biophotonic light emitted by our cellular batteries.
We saw how ancient traditions like mudras, Reiki, and Zen gardens We're manipulating these exact biophysical levers centuries before we had the fluid dynamics or quantum biology to explain them.
And we confronted the systemic crises corrupting our frequency ecosystem, from the epigenetic padlocks of modern food to the Pygmalion microphone feedback in schools and the surveillance capitalism of our phones.
And finally, we looked at Tesla's three forces, learning that our goal isn't to destroy the resistance of the world, but to build the internal windmill that uses that resistance to generate light.
You are a biological software, a Biogiciel, constantly updating based on the frequencies you encounter.
Which brings us back to that room you walked into at the very beginning of this deep dive, the one with the heavy vibe. If our connective tissues literally act as antennas, if our cellular water acts as a bioelectric semiconductor, and if we are constantly emitting and absorbing light and frequency in an informal, invisible economy.
What is the actual true currency of your daily life?
That is the ultimate question we have to ask ourselves. Are you perhaps bankrupting yourself in a hidden biological ledger that modern society completely ignores, while foolishly thinking you're getting richer in the one that your bank can see?
It's something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you move through the rest of your day, pay close attention to the signals you select and the resonances you project into the world. You are shaping the terrain. Until next time.